Hi, this is Bill Crabe. I'm going to try something new with today's edition of the Nevada 4th District Profile. Instead of writing a couple of pages about what I could find about the issues that seem to matter in this district, I thought I would take you along on a web tour as I research what those issues are and what Congress is doing or not doing about them. I will highlight 10 pages. You'll find the links to each of them on the district page below the video. I hope you enjoy the tour and find it useful. We'll start with a search I almost always begin with in some form, as I'm trying to understand the political dynamics of a district. Congressman Crescent Hardy defeated incumbent Stephen Horsford in last November's midterm election in the Nevada 4th, so this is a Google search string that encompasses each of their names, along with the word issues. Although the first link has interesting stuff about the politics of why Hardy beat Horsford, it has nothing to do with the issues of one candidate resonating more with the audience, which is of course part of the problem. This next link I came across in another search. It's several years old now, but as you may have seen at the top of the page, Lake Mead's water issues have steadily worsened since the article came out in 2008, to the point where the lake is now at its lowest level in history, and drilling to a long-anticipated last straw into the lake has recently been completed. This page, if you make the time, is a really nice look at multiple angles on the complex issues with water in the desert Southwest. It's well done. This link from just this week covers the latest on the third, or if you prefer, last straw. There's quite a bit here that explains what was done to keep water flowing to Las Vegas from Lake Mead, and why. Given the importance of water to the city of North Las Vegas, which represents the bulk of the residents in Congressman Hardy's district, I clicked on this link on his homepage, which details his recent support for a bill called the Regulatory Integrity Protection Act. I'm going to Google Regulatory Integrity Protection Act, which is quite a mouthful, and put it into the News tab on Google so that you can get news stories that are related to the Act. Putting it in quotes, by the way, will make sure that those words appear together and make it much more likely that the results that you get back are actually about that bill. Congressman Hardy's website says he supports this bill to, quote, clearly define waters of the U.S., end quote. But that's a bit misleading, since what the bill in fact wants to do is clarify what isn't water. This page is an op-ed from the political blog The Hill that implies that the Regulatory Integrity Protection Act is a bill that's aimed at scaling back what the EPA has already been doing for years under the auspices of the Clean Water Act. It's pretty compelling, but being an op-ed, it's also pretty one-sided. It does have an interesting passage, though, about an amendment to the bill from Congresswoman Donna Edwards of Maryland, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Here's another op-ed, this one in the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. Note that it's written by the head of the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau. He's not exactly an impartial reviewer either, but it is certainly a different perspective than the previous version. One of these two writers either doesn't understand the bill or is intentionally misrepresenting the facts. These are very different stories about the same piece of legislation. Which brings me back to the Edwards Amendment mentioned in the previous op-ed. That article said that Ms. Edwards' amendment would have prevented the federal agencies from expanding the historic scope of the Clean Water Act or from limiting activities that were already allowed. So here's a video of Congresswoman Edwards offering that amendment on the House floor back in May. If you want to listen, her amendment runs from about 1 hour to 1 hour and 5 in the recording, and then the argument against it runs from 1:05 to 1:10. It will take you about 10 minutes. See what you think is more compelling. It's a fascinating, if troubling, look at how two people that are paid to come together can't seem to do so within the system they've been given. Finally, this is what the EPA page itself says about what this new clean water rule does, and there's also a link that says what it doesn't do. Read carefully, and you'll see that someone somewhere is either being misleading or being misled. Congress has to get to the bottom of this issue. Regardless of the conclusion you might draw about the bill, it begs the question, is starting a process that took years and cost millions from scratch really the right answer? Isn't there some way to give both sides what they want? There should be, of course, but perhaps not. Congressman Hardy's website. One of the bills he's authored in his 6 months in the House is called the LAND, which stands for Land Acquisition to Cut the National Debt Act, which would require the U.S. government not to exceed the acreage it now owns without a balanced budget in place. Land rights are legitimately an issue in Nevada, which is 4/5 federal land, but even beyond the long odds of passing a balanced budget requirement into legislation, Congressman Hardy seems to have something else in mind. Let's listen to a section of his introduction to the bill.
Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. The department would have the opportunity to net more acreage under the aforementioned agencies' jurisdiction under my bill. That is no longer as a federal budget. That is as long as the federal budget is balanced for the given year. I do not believe this is too much to ask. Where I come from in the private sector, if you don't have a successful business plan, you don't budget well, you go out of business. We all know that the BLM, Fish and Wildlife, and the Park Service aren't going out of business anytime soon. Much to my chagrin, but at least
If I'm interpreting that right, the congressman said it was to his chagrin that the Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife Service, and National Park Service won't go out of business. It seems hard to believe that's representative of the views of his whole district, since the Lake Mead National Rec Area is the 6th most visited national park in the country, which is ahead of the Grand Canyon and Yellowstone, by the way. One last issue of note here is particularly timely. As early as today, President Obama is expected to declare a large 700,000-acre parcel the Basin and Range National Monument. It's in the Nevada 4th. Congressman Hardy has been a vocal opponent and introduced legislation this week that would block the use of federal funds for the creation of these types of monuments. It's too late for this one, but he says local residents were not given input into this decision and don't want the monument. Art fans who are just people that like big things should also Google the Michael Heiser project called The City, which is referenced in the article and is certainly part of the point of the monument. It sounds pretty amazing. Complex, big picture issues in the Nevada desert. Do you live there? Let us know what you think. If not, do you know how your representative voted on these issues and why? Thanks, folks. We'll see you soon in the Missouri 7th.